Yo, what up, and welcome everybody. Welcome back to Pnoid News. Man, listen, I got a great video planned out for us today. Yesterday, I was hanging out on a buddy of mine. I was hanging out listening to a buddy of mine stream while I was driving down the road. This is the Insomnus with Ryan himself and Sinrise. I'm going to tell you what, Ryan's been stepping his fucking game up here recently. Like, I'll be real. I think this might have been the best stream I ever saw in my whole life. If it wasn't for the fact... It would have been the best stream. It wasn't for the fact that these niggas have legitimately the longest intro in the game, right? It's like fucking like 2 hours or some shit. Their intro is ridiculous. Like, yo, it's fucking bananas. I'm like, man, listen, all right? Like, I just want to hear y'all niggas talk. I don't care about your fucking intro. I know you like making them, you know what I mean? Because you like, you know, all the banana stuff that you're able to do. But that's what regular videos are for. But anyway, yo, look. Man, look, all right? I want to go over this. This is the coolest fucking like thing I've heard in the longest, and it's what I've been saying basically for the past 3 years. But I want to go over this, and you know what I mean, I'm gonna let him read it, and then you know we're just gonna react to it. So let's, you know what I mean, let's get to it and whatnot.
Website that we haven't visited yet together.
Sweet.
Yeah, this article is called "The Systems."
The author of this article is a one Theodore Kaczynski. Guy, I think. I'm not sure how to pronounce it exactly.
Sounds like topics: activism, post-left, reformism, revolution.
And may I say, like, yo, in the background playing Biggie Give Me One More Chance is fucking beat. Yo, amazing. Legit. Fucking amazing. Especially for some West Coast guys.
Technological slavery. This is when the fuck was this written? If anybody has the answer to that, let us know in the chat. I thought it was written a month ago.
Well, it was written in 1995, from what I can see. You know what I'm saying? I did a little bit of research real quick just to see what I can, you know what I mean, stand here and find on it. I think this was written in 1995. Let's keep banging.
It sounds like it was written a month ago. It is broken into 5 parts. 1, what the system is not. 2, how the system exploits the impulse to rebel. 3, the system's neatest trick. 4, the trick is not perfect. And 5, an example.
Let's just skip down to the example.
No.
You gonna read the whole thing?
Oh yeah.
Oh god.
We don't have that much today because I cleared the schedule for this.
All right, everybody, buckle up.
Here's a quote from Jacques Ellul. Hold on. Speaking of French people. Oh no. Object isn't in the Collins. He's always correcting me on my... He's not French. He would probably hate it if he heard me say that.
Yeah.
What's up, Asherella?
Original Asherella. Not one of them cheap knockoffs.
Often imitated, never duplicated. The supreme luxury of the society of technical necessity will be to grant the bonuses of useless revolt and of an acquiescent smile. That's a quote from Jacques Ellul from the Technological Society. Ryan took his Adderall today. Dude, I have a crippling addiction to caffeine. The system has played a trick on today's would-be revolutionaries and rebels. Rebels, yeah. There's a lot of rebels in this, and there's rebels also. The system has played a trick on the rebels. The trick is so cute that if it had been consciously planned, one would have to admire it for its almost mathematical elegance.
All right, see, this is important for everybody to understand, all right? There are things that are developed, right, that aren't intentional, and there's things that, you know, I mean, are developed that are intentional. This is one of those unintentional things, and like they really don't know that it happens, but it happens constantly, and it's one of those phenomenons, right, where like, you know, you'll just have, there will always be poor in society, right? Because it's just like, it's a byproduct of what the fuck it is we do. It's not a feature, it's a bug. But like, you know what I mean, it just is what it is. This is another one of those bugs, right? That like nobody has any idea what happens. like human beings consciously stand here and have group dynamics that just automatically kick in, and people have no idea that they're there, and they have no idea what exactly is going on. All they know is that it is going on at that moment, right? But they don't see the bigger picture. They don't look at it at a macro level, because most individuals are far too caught up in themselves and don't have the ability to step back and look at things from, you know what I mean, like a world macro view, looking down like a god or like a king, you know what I mean? But this is just one of those things that happens.
1. What the system is not. Let's begin by making the clear that the system is not. I think it means to say what the system is not. The system is not George W. Bush. Okay, so maybe this was the 90s. All right, I don't know.
Maybe.
I still think it was a month ago. The system is not George W. Bush and his advisors and appointees. It's not the cops who maltreat protesters. It's not the CEOs of the multinational corporations, and it's not the Frankensteins in their laboratories who criminally tinker with the genes of living things.
Hey, I just gotta say, acknowledge that he used Frankenstein in the right context.
That's true, as in the doctor.
Right. As opposed to how it's commonly used, that the monster is called Frankenstein. And that's not.
You know, it was him being a pedantic dick like that. I'm not saying that that's what you are. That's what got him caught.
Oh, really?
It could have been that. What was it? He said, okay. It was have his cake and eat it too. Have your cake and eat it too is what people say. But I believe what the quote actually is eat your cake and have it too. And it was because he used that phraseology in one of his letters that his brother was like, that's fucking him. I used to argue with him about that when we were little kids. That's him. It could have been this, because nobody says Frankenstein like that.
Right.
If it weren't that, it would have been this. We got him. All of these people are servants of the system, but in themselves, they do not constitute the system. In particular, you guys, how is the volume? How's the music and all the rest of the shit? I know it went out. It went away for a second, but let me know, okay? I think we're all right. Okay, so all of these people are servants of the system, but in themselves, they do not constitute the system. In particular, the personal and individual values, attitudes, beliefs, and behavior of any of these people may be significantly in conflict with the needs of the system. To illustrate with an example, the system requires respect for property rights, yet CEOs, cops, scientists, and politicians sometimes steal. And speaking of stealing, we don't have to confine ourselves to actual lifting of physical objects. We can include all illegal means of acquiring property, such as cheating on income tax, accepting bribes, and any other form of graft or corruption. But the fact that CEOs, cops, scientists, and politicians sometimes steal does not mean that stealing is a part of the system. On the contrary, when a cop or politician steals something, he is rebelling against the system's requirement of respect for law and property. Yet, even when they are stealing, these people remain servants of the system as long as they publicly maintain their support for law and property.
I mean, like, yo, look, here's the thing. It's kind of like the system, if you really look at it, it's like a machine with tolerances, right? And so in having like tolerances, like you'll have acceptable amounts of, you know what I mean, the machine not being absolutely precise. And that's kind of what he's saying right here is that like they don't have to always be perfect, right? Like they don't have to be the best individuals, you know what I'm saying, all the time. They don't have to constantly serve the system. They have tolerances for what they can and cannot do. Now, if they go and start stealing people's homes, right, or stealing people's wives or like stealing people's children, then the system will stand here and buck, you know what I mean, and fucking, you know, throw them back out and they'll become criminals of the system. But, you know, say like, you know, they steal, you know, I mean, a couple $1,000s on the income tax, not paying their taxes, or they steal, you know, whatever it is, they use eminent domain law to, snatch up some piece of a farmer's field somewhere that you're not going to fucking notice. That's just acceptable tolerances inside of the system itself.
Whatever illegal acts may be committed by politicians, cops, or CEOs as individuals, theft, bribery, and graft are not part of the system but diseases of the system. The less stealing there is, the better the system functions, and that is why the servants and boosters of the system always advocate obedience to the law in public, even if they may sometimes find it convenient to break the law in private. We see this. We see this a lot. That's why I thought it was written the other day.
Well, it's really important that, okay, so here's the thing. People as a whole have to obey the law for the most part, right? Like, like they say the average citizen commits like fucking 4 felonies a day or whatever the case is. But if everybody stood here and cheated a little bit, it would add up to a lot of cheating because there's 330 million of us. And even back then in 1995 when this was written, there was still 250 million individuals. And so if 250 million people steal $1, that's $250 million. They steal $100, you know what I'm saying? It's something like 2.5 billion or 20.5 billion dollars, right? You see, it adds up fucking quick because of the fucking sheer amounts. So nobody promotes individuals to stand here and buck the system as a whole.
Take another example. Although police are the system's enforcers, police brutality is not a part of the system. When the cops beat the crap out of a suspect, they're not doing the system's work. They're only letting out their own anger and hostility. The system's goal is not brutality or the expression of anger. As far as police work is concerned, the system's goal is to compel obedience to its rules and do so with the least possible amount of disruption, violence, and bad publicity. Thus, from the system's point of view, the ideal cop is one who never gets angry, never uses any more violence than necessary, and as far as possible relies on manipulation rather than force to keep people under control. Police brutality is only another disease of the system, not part of the system. This gets a lot better.
Well, like, but this is kind of a good point, right? Like, as a whole, you know what I'm saying? In the end of the day, like, they're kind of they're gonna brush past it a little bit, but I kind of want to touch on it. Like, you have to understand that human beings are human beings, no matter what happens. You know what I'm saying? They're not fucking automatons. They're not robots. And there's a certain amount of violence that is inherent in policing. Like, no matter what happens, you're still kidnapping somebody and throwing them in a cage if they commit a crime. At the end of the day, that's really what you're doing, and that's violence. Like, and to anybody, like, if anybody else just kidnapped somebody and threw him in a cage because, like, say, like, your buddy borrowed $20 and he owes it to you, and you didn't pay, he didn't pay you back. If you took him and snatched him and threw him in your fucking basement, right? That's fucking kidnapping. But like, the government can do this to you at any given time. It's still violence. So violence begets violence begets violence. Like, it is what it is. Violence is violence. But the system wants to maintain, the fucking monopoly on violence that it has.
Promise. For proof, look at the attitude of the media. The mainstream media almost universally condemns police brutality. Of course, the attitude of the mainstream media represents, as a rule, the consensus of opinion among the powerful classes in our society as to what is good for the system. What has just been said about theft, graft, and police brutality applies also to the issues of discrimination and victimization, such as racism, sexism, homophobia, poverty, and sweatshops. All of these are bad for the system. For example, the more that black people feel themselves scorned or excluded, the more likely they are to turn to crime, and the less likely they are to educate themselves for careers that will make them useful to the system. Modern
that's another important point. Like, we got to touch on real quick before we go any further, right? Like, it's important to understand that, they want you to be a tax-paying citizen, right? Like, in the end of the day, that's what they want. Just like in Europe, they don't want them Islamist individuals, you know what I'm saying, just to, come in and, rape their women. Like, what they want is they want them to fucking get a job and pay taxes, right? And in doing so, they're not paying taxes for themselves. They're paying taxes for the generations that came before them. And that's what they want. And that's why, like everybody frowns upon discrimination and racism and things of this nature. Understand that.
Technology, with its rapid long-distance transportation and its disruption of traditional ways of life, has led to the mixing of populations. So nowadays, people of different races, nationalities, cultures, and religions have to live and work side by side. If people hate or reject one another on the basis of race, ethnicity, religion, sexual preference, etc., the resulting conflicts interfere with the functioning of the system. Apart from a few old fossilized relics of the past like Jesse Helms, the leaders of the system know this very well. And that's why we're taught in school and through the media to believe that racism, sexism, homophobia, and so forth are social evils to be eliminated. No doubt, some of the leaders of the system, some of the politicians, scientists, CEOs privately feel that a woman's place is in the home, or that homosexuality and interracial marriage are repugnant. But even if the majority of them felt that way, it would not mean that racism, sexism, and homophobia were part of the system, any more than the existence of stealing among the leaders means that stealing is part of the system. Just as the system must promote respect for law and property for the sake of its own security, the system must also discourage racism and other forms of victimization for the same reason. That is why the system, notwithstanding any private deviations by individual members of the elite, is basically committed to suppressing discrimination and victimization. What do we have?
I mean, that's kind of a good point. And people will say that, like, yo, racism is part of the system, and it's really not. In the end of the day, like, racism isn't really part of the government, right? Like, I understand, like, yeah, the government stands here and, like, it sells coke in the hood or whatever the case is, or pumps in guns and things of this nature, right? But understand, like, yo, the vast majority of that shit was to undermine. It was a system trying to defend itself, to undermine, like, the revolutionary forces that wanted to break up the system as a whole. And that's important to understand.
Your place?
No, I was reading the chat.
We have many systems all competing for control, but overall class-based.
That may be true. That may be true.
That's what FTW.
You can have what you want, yeah, what you want. Sky is the limit, and you know that we'll just keep on, just keeping on. Yo, I love this fucking song. It's one of my fucking favorites.
Nil. Would you just call it Nil for short?
I think it's on the Life After Death album. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, that's fine. W is a big word, so nil is good enough for me.
In fact, W has more syllables than win.
Nil. What do you think, nil?
Yeah, for the win is faster than FTW. Ha!
Fuck the world is longer. World is almost 2 syllables. But it's not.
Oh, yeah.
Feel the women. All right. I don't know. For proof, nil is easy. All right, cool. He says, for proof, look again at the attitude of the mainstream media. In spite of occasional timid dissent by a few of the more daring and reactionary commentators, media propaganda overwhelmingly favors racial and gender equality and acceptance of homosexuality and interracial marriage. The system needs a population that is meek, nonviolent, domesticated, docile, and obedient. It needs to avoid any conflict or disruption that could interfere with the orderly function of the social machine. In addition to suppressing racial, ethnic, religious, and other group hostilities, it also has to suppress or harness for its own advantage all other tendencies that could lead to disruption or disorder, such as machismo, aggressive impulses, and any inclination to violence.
We get back to that monopoly on violence thing again, legitimately. Right? It's always about the monopoly on violence. And understand, as the system has been operating since then, like, yo, there's a reason why, like, they're like, oh man, you know, you can't fucking say anything about immigration and things of this nature, because the system has now required to have cheap labor to continue forward. Right? And this is all part of the system. This is something that, like, a lot of people really don't understand. Right? Like, there's a reason why, like, they do what they do, and they say what they say, and they act the way they act, and they fucking ban and censor who they censor, right? It's because, like, the system requires shit. And a lot of people really don't understand that or have that conversation.
Naturally, traditional racial and ethnic antagonisms die slowly. Machismo, aggressiveness, and violent impulses are not easily suppressed, and attitudes towards sex and gender identity are not transformed overnight. Therefore, there are many individuals who resist these changes, and the system is faced with the problem of overcoming their resistance. Fuck that. Pnoid News says, I've been explaining this for 3 years.
I told y'all I was there yesterday. Like, legit.
Jimmy Philly, what's up?
Dude, what's up, Jimmy? Yeah, I was texting Jimmy last night, and he was like, dude, did you check out my new video? He had a run-in with a lawyer who happened to be, like, a Trump lawyer also. He's got one video on his channel, and then there's a follow-up. You guys should go check it out. I'll post it in the Discord, if I remember. Or, Jimmy, you can do that, too. All right, number 2. How the system exploits the impulse to rebel. All of us in modern society are hemmed in by a dense network of rules and regulations. We're at the mercy of large organizations such as corporations, governments, labor unions, universities, churches, and political parties, and consequently, we are powerless.
Let me say this before we go forward, man. Look, I never had the experience that churches ever hemmed me to fuck in. Right? Like, yo, a lot of people fucking stand here and go, oh man, the churches fucking stand here and did this, and the religion did this, and all this fucking nonsense. Never in my life have I ever fucking experienced a church stopping me from doing something. Like, legit, because, like, there's never been an organization or anything in my life that I couldn't just walk away from and go do my own thing. Even when it comes to family, like, I'm like, oh, y'all niggas don't want me to fuck you. I'm gonna go do what the fuck it is I want to do. That's my fucking business, right? But the rest of these, like, the things that you have to interact in when it comes to corporations, governments, universities, or political parties, like, you have to interact with those fucking things. You don't have a goddamn choice, right? And I don't understand, like, why fucking churches get thrown in here. Because, like, at any time you can go, fuck church. Like, I don't know why it is that you do this shit. It's dumb.
A result of the servitude, the powerlessness, and the other indignities that the system inflicts on us, there's widespread frustration, which leads to an impulse to rebel. And this is where the system plays its neatest trick. Through a brilliant sleight of hand, it turns rebellion to its own advantage. Many people don't understand the roots of their own frustration. Hence, their rebellion is directionless. They know that they want to rebel, but they don't know what they want to rebel against. Luckily, the system is able to fill their need by providing them with a list of standard and stereotyped grievances in the name of which to rebel. Racism, homophobia, women's issues, poverty, sweatshops, the whole laundry bag of activist issues.
Except for the sweatshops part. The activists seem to have forgotten about the sweatshops.
Yo, Simrad's got a good point there. Legit. You know what I'm saying? I was standing here like, yeah, legit. Like, nobody really cares that your iPhone's built by a bunch of people who live in a fucking, like, they have like 12 people in a one fucking bedroom apartment or some shit, or in one bedroom all together. They have like bunk beds set up for them. And like, they're jumping off of fucking roofs trying to escape this goddamn place because of how miserable it is to work there. But nobody cares about that. Nobody gives a fuck about how shitty the fucking workers are treated to build our fucking goods. Like, yo, let's keep going though.
Yeah, I think they actually like the sweatshops now.
Yeah, well, it makes all the stuff they love, you know, shoes and iPads and stuff. So you just don't hear about the sweatshops very much these days.
You know, that kind of proves his whole point here, actually.
Yeah?
I think so. Huge numbers of would-be rebels take the bait in fighting racism, sexism, etc., etc. They're only doing the system's work for it. In spite of this, they imagine that they are rebelling against the system. How is this possible? First, 50 years ago, the system was not yet committed to equality for black people, women, and homosexuals, so that action in favor of these causes was really a form of rebellion. Consequently, these causes came to be conventionally regarded as rebel causes. They have retained that status today simply as a matter of tradition. That is, because each rebel generation imitates the preceding generations. And you can see this on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. You can see all these fucking commies posting their goddamn, their MLKs, their Malcolm X's, their Angela Davis's, their Maya Angelou's, all that shit.
I just want to say, thank God I'm not on fucking Twitter, like legit, or Facebook, like, cause I can't fucking do it. Like, I can't tolerate retarded people that fucking long. It's too hard for me to do. It's just so goddamn difficult. Like, I can't fucking, like, I just want to reach through the fucking screen and yoke somebody to fuck out in the end of the day. Like, just, I want to duff people to fuck out when I hear this nonsense, right? Because it's so fucking dumb. But like, yeah, legit, you know what I'm saying? Like, this is the neatest trick that the fucking system actually plays. You know, like, yo, all this racism, sexism, fucking nonsense bullshit, whatever, like, yo, it's complete and utter garbage, right? It's all nonsense. It's all like, it's all the Fugazi and shit when it comes down to it.
I mean, people on our side do that also, but
right.
we'll get there. Second, there are still significant numbers of people, as I pointed out earlier, who resist the social changes that the system requires. Some of these people are even authority figures, such as cops, judges, or politicians. These resistors provide a target for the would-be rebels, someone for them to rebel against. Commentators like Rush Limbaugh help the process by ranting against the activists. Seeing that they have made someone angry fosters the activist's illusion that they are rebelling. Third, that's interesting that he would bring that up, given that Rush just kicked the bucket.
Right.
Third, in order to bring themselves into conflict, even with that majority of the system's leaders who fully accept the social changes that the system demands, the would-be rebels insist on solutions that go farther than what the system's leaders consider prudent. They show exaggerated anger over trivial matters. For example, they demand payment of reparations to black people, and they often become enraged at any criticism of a minority group, no matter how cautious and reasonable. In this way, the activists are able to maintain the illusion that they are rebelling against the system. But the illusion is absurd. Agitation against racism, sexism, homophobia, and the like no more constitutes rebellion against the system than does agitation against political graft and corruption. Those who work against graft and corruption are not rebelling, but acting as the system's enforcers. How many times have we seen somebody who's acting like the system's enforcer? All these little fucking hall monitors.
Well, I don't think that's, I don't like, yo, here, I'm going to disagree with Ryan here. I don't think that's what he's saying. I think with this, you know what I mean? The people who act against graft and corruption, they're not rebelling. They're acting as the system enforcers. Basically, what they're doing is he's saying, look, you know what I mean? Like, the system wants property rights and respect for law and order. And when you stand here and you catch somebody doing graft and, you know what I mean, corruption, when you catch somebody stealing, when you catch somebody, you know what I mean, cheating in the system and shit, like, you're basically standing here enforcing the system as a whole. And I think that's kind of what he's saying. And it's the same thing, you know, I mean, as individuals who are sitting here fighting against racism, sexism, homophobia, all that bullshit, right? Whatever fucking ism you want to stand here and do, right? Like, yo, you're acting as the system as enforcer. Like, yo, you're literally doing the bidding of the system at that fucking point.
And all these Karens, the ones that take it upon themselves. And it looks weird, too. It's like, dude, why are you out here fucking shilling for Big Pharma and making sure that everybody's, you know, following all the little rules and shit? I see them all over the place.
Yeah, they're like agents from the Matrix.
They're acting as the system's enforcers. They are helping to keep the politicians obedient to the rules of the system. Those who work against racism, sexism, and homophobia similarly are acting as the system's enforcers. They help the system to suppress the deviant, racist, sexist, and homophobic attitudes that cause problems for the system. But the activists don't only act as the system's enforcers. They also serve as kind of a lightning rod that protects the system by drawing public resentment away from the system and its institutions. For example, there's several reasons why it was to the system's advantage to get women out of the home and into the workplace. 50 years ago, if the system, as represented by the government or the media, had begun to, out of the blue, a propaganda campaign designed to make it socially acceptable for women to center their lives on careers rather than on the home, the natural human resistance to change would have caused widespread public resentment. What actually happened was that the changes were spearheaded by radical feminists behind whom the system's institutions trailed at a safe distance. The resentment of the more conservative members of society was directed primarily against the radical feminists rather than the system and its institutions, because the changes sponsored by the system seemed slow and moderate in comparison with the more radical solutions advocated by feminists. And even these relatively slow changes were seen as having been forced on the system by pressure from the radicals.
All right, so let's talk about this, right? Because this is, this is kind of like super important and shit. All right, how do I put this? I absolutely believe that, things that are good for the system end up getting pushed in the system, right? Like that happens quite often, like this whole BLM thing, everything of this nature, right? Trump was fucking with the system as a whole. And I've explained this like 1,000 times, where Trump was, destroying these trade alliances and getting rid of, the way the corporations made money and stopping immigration, which would have raised prices for Americans and caused inflation in the system, right? So Trump was literally a threat to the system as a whole. He was rewriting code for the system, right? Because that's what needs to happen every once in a while. It happened in the 70s, happened in, the 1940s. It happened, here, and it's happening right now at the moment, throughout the world, because everybody's writing new code for their system that they have. Each of us have our own operating system as far as, the economic way of things work. And now when you have things like BLM and things of this nature, which are pushed by corporations and pushed by government officials, this is the system standing here defending itself from a distance, right? Because we really don't know the level at which, all these activists were used, but we do know they were used, because all of a sudden they don't exist anymore. They're not covered by the media, right? They're not given a spotlight like they were throughout the whole summer, because this is the system standing here promoting itself and promoting its ideologies. That's important to understand this as a whole. So understand, the system is not Donald Trump. Donald Trump was not the system. Donald Trump was rewriting code on the fly for the system. This is something that, nobody wants to really talk about as a whole.
Well, thanks, Tom. Tom P says, this might be the best stream I've ever heard.
Wow, man.
Nice. Give me a second. What the fuck are we listening to?
The liberal is more deceitful.
Exactly, dude. Malcolm X.
The white liberal.
Watch your mouth, sweetheart. All right, what do we got? The fuck? Okay, so. Number 3, the system's neatest trick. So, in a nutshell, the system's neatest trick is this. For the sake of its own efficiency and security, the system needs to bring about deep and radical social changes to match the changed conditions resulting from technological process. Frustration of life under the circumstances is imposed by the systems leads to rebellious impulses. 3 rebellious impulses are co-opted by the system in service of the social change it requires. Activists rebel against the old and outmoded values that are no longer of use to the system and in favor of the new values that the system needs us to accept. 4. In this way, rebellious impulses, which otherwise might have been dangerous to the system, are given an outlet that is not only harmless to the system, but useful to it. 5. Much of the public resentment resulting for the imposition of social changes is drawn away from the system and its institutions and is directed instead at the radicals who spearheaded the social changes.
So instead of standing here, and this is what I've been bitching about, right? This is my biggest gripe, is that like, yo, all these Antifa cocksuckers and, you know, I mean, all this nonsense with the Black Lives Matter movement, I get really mad at y'all dumb motherfuckers who continually blame them, when in the end of the day, we're not blaming universities. We're not blaming, you know what I mean, fucking corporations for funding them. We're not blaming, you know what I mean, U.S. companies. We're not blaming fucking sitting senators. We blame Antifa. We blame the individuals doing the actions, when in the end of the day, they're the individuals who, like, at all, okay, how's this work? At all times, people are rebelling. Right? It's kind of what this guy's saying, right? This is what Ted's saying. He's saying, look, at all times, people rebel. And then what they do is the system stands here and grabs a hold of one of those rebellious movements and pushes it to the forefront. That's something that nobody even has any idea about. Basically, they pick and choose what is useful to them. You know what I mean, as far as a whole in the system, and them, I mean, corporations, CEOs, you know what I mean, larger individuals who have money to fund these movements, use it, push it forward, and then we blame the activists rather than blaming the system itself, because it's a system that does it. This is something that, you know what I mean, legitimately I've been saying for years, but like y'all motherfuckers ain't been goddamn, well, you know, y'all listen, you know what I mean, but the world as a whole don't fucking listen.
Of course. Huh. Like I said, this could have been written the other day.
I know. It's crazy.
Of course, this trick wasn't planned in advance by the system's leaders, who are not conscious of having played a trick at all. The way it works is something like this. In deciding what position to take on any issue, the editors, publishers, and owners of the media must consciously or subconsciously balance several factors. They must consider how their readers or viewers will react to what they print or broadcast about the issue. They must consider how their advertisers, their peers in the media, and other powerful persons will react. And they must consider the effect on the security of the system of what they print or broadcast. These practical considerations will usually outweigh whatever personal feelings they may have about the issue. The personal feelings of the media leaders, their advertisers, and other powerful persons are varied. They might be liberal or conservative, religious or atheistic. The only universal common ground among the leaders is their commitment to the system, its security, and its power. Therefore, within the limits imposed by what the public is willing to accept, the principal factor in determining the attitudes propagated by the media is a rough consensus of opinion among the media leaders and other powerful people as to what is good for the system. Thus,
all right, before we skip forward here, like, yo, let me break down that right here. Understand something. Like, yo, these individuals want to stay in power. And wanting to stay in power means that they have to act a certain way. They live by the rules of the system too. And so they, you know what I mean, are fully understanding of not the system as a whole, but they're understanding that, you know, their ability to, and the reason why they got promoted to the point of where they are today, right? You know what I mean, through, you know what I mean, through the ranks of whatever corporation or whatever government function that they do, is because of the fact that they stand here and project the attributes that make them, you know what I mean, useful to the system. And that's very, very important to understand. And it's not a conscious thing. It's not like somebody's picking these individuals out of a box. It's, I mean, because that's what everybody goes like, oh man, like, these, you know, the New World Orders out here, you know, they're picking the leaders and trying to make sure that they have gatekeepers in front of things, right? It's not it. And that's just really not it at all. Understand something, like, yo, individuals that fit the best are the people who are going to rise to the tops. And those individuals are going to be people who are willing to stand here and motherfucking make the sacrifice in personal liberty to sit here and fucking continue to garner power in the system. Now, because power, all right, as a whole, understand something, like, yo, these individuals can't do something that's outside of what the system wants. That's very important to understand. This is like a giant machine. You're not going to have a cog turn in the opposite direction because it'll get rejected and thrown out of the system. That's something you have to fully be aware of. You know what I mean? Like, yo, look, it's not that people are picking these people. It's the fact that they legitimately, you know what I'm saying, are a part of a machine that will just throw it out automatically because everybody else wants to keep their power and nobody wants to go against the system and risk, you know what I mean, having their family live in the street because they're all mortgaged up to their fucking eyeballs too. The more money you spend, the more money you make, the more money you spend. That's how the fuck this shit works. You don't end up making a whole bunch of money and then just not spending any of it. Unless you're like a super billionaire, you know what I mean? Like we're Bill Gates or Bezos. Buffett, you know what I mean? But everybody else, you make $1 million, you know what I mean? Whatever the case is, you're going to spend $1 million. It's how that operates. You know what I mean? If you make like, you know, $1 million a year, you're going to have a $10 million house. So you're still $10 million in fucking, you're still $9 million in debt after year one. And even then you got to pay taxes. So you're down to $700,000. Get what I'm saying? Feel me? Then you ain't spend no money on cars, clothes, fucking electricity, none of the bullshit, or running your business. It's important to understand these fucking things, these fucking little bullshit factors.
When an editor or other media leader sets out to decide what attitude to take toward a movement or a cause, his first thought is whether the movement includes anything that is good or bad for the system. Maybe he tells himself that his decision is based on a moral, philosophical, or religious grounds, but it is an observable fact that in practice, the security of the system takes precedence over all other factors in determining the attitude of the media. For example, if a news magazine editor looks at a militia movement, he may or may not sympathize personally with some of its grievances and goals, but he also sees that there will be a strong consensus among his advertisers and his peers in the media that the militia movement is potentially dangerous to the system and therefore should be discouraged. Under these circumstances, he knows that his magazine had better take a negative attitude toward the militia movement. The negative attitude of the media presumably is part of the reason why the militia movement has died down.
Remember, the system wants a monopoly on violence, so therefore average citizens having the ability to conduct large-scale violence is dangerous to the system as a whole. Because they don't want you to have the ability to throw the shackles off of yourself.
Same editor looks at radical feminism. He sees that some of its more extreme solutions would be dangerous to the system, but he also sees that feminism holds much that is useful to the system. Women's participation in the business and technical world integrates them and their families better into the system. Their talents are of service to the system in business and technical matters. Feminist emphasis on ending domestic abuse and rape also serves the system's needs, since rape and abuse, like other forms of violence, are dangerous to the system. I don't know exactly what he's trying to say right there.
Well, you know, I say chain bitches to radiators, you know what I'm saying? But ultimately, it's just to save them from themselves. You know what I mean? The whole reason that came up was like the whole Pnoid radiator thing came up. Because I said, like, yo, what if your bitch is like trying to go out and do heroin and shit? Like, yo, maybe you should chain that bitch to a radiator. They're like, oh, would you dare chain the bitch? Like, and that's kind of where everything got to. I'm going to tell you what, last night there was a stream. Freeful sent me a link. And like I had a link to the stream y'all that I was working. I didn't have the ability to hop on. There was this stream that sat here and where this dude was legitimately like fucking taking advantage of a drunk bitch and covering her in like fucking mustard and ketchup packets and shit. And I, as a man, as a dude, I felt like ripping this motherfucker's throat out. Even though inside of my head, I legitimately felt, I knew that like, yo, this bitch is learning a fucking valuable goddamn lesson. Right, about getting drunk and passing out in front of like fucking strangers or individuals who she shouldn't be comfortable around. You know what I mean? And that like, yo, as a whole, like fucking our society would do well not to give this power to women. But the truth of the matter is if at any time the police can sit here and, you know what I mean, take care of this type of situation, or individuals can call the fucking cops or whatever it is, how much real danger is it for them? And is it, And the other half of that is that we want these individuals out of our society who would be willing to take advantage of somebody who's passed out fucking drunk on the floor. You know what I mean? You don't want these individuals around you. This is what this system is here to do. This is what, you know what I mean, society does as a whole. That's important to understand.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
Yes, don't do those things.
He did a couple things that you shouldn't do, but overall,
Yes.
I'm down with the message. I just don't. Nobody go and start rape waffing. That would be bad. Perhaps most important, the editor recognizes that the pettiness and meaninglessness of modern housework and social isolation of the modern housewife can lead to serious frustration for many women. Frustration that'll cause problems for the system unless women are allowed an outlet through careers in the business and technical world. Even if this editor is a macho type who personally feels more comfortable with women in a subordinate position, he knows that feminism, at least in a relatively moderate form, is good for the system. He knows that his editorial posture must be favorable toward moderate feminism, otherwise he'll face the disapproval of his advertisers and other powerful people. This is why
As I said, man, like, yo, look, everybody's kind of everybody's a slave to the system. They're all just cogs in a fucking machine. And those advertisers are only going to get mad, right? And disapprove and pull off their fucking ads from that newspaper or fucking TV station or fucking YouTube channel, whatever it is, right? Because of the fact, right, that like legitimately they're a cog in the system too and they want women to buy shit. Understand, like, yo, it's just a giant fucking machine. There is no goddamn controls.
mainstream media's attitude has been generally supportive of moderate feminism, mixed toward radical feminism, and consistently hostile only toward the most extreme feminist positions. Through this type of process, rebel movements that are dangerous to the system are subjected to negative propaganda, while rebel movements that are believed to be useful to the system are given cautious encouragement in the media. Unconscious absorption of the media propaganda influences would-be rebels to rebel in ways that serve the interests of the system. The university intellectuals also play an important role in carrying out the system's trick. Though they like to fancy themselves independent thinkers, the intellectuals are, allowing for individual exceptions, the most over-socialized, the most conformist, the tamest and most domesticated, the most pampered, dependent, and spineless group in America today. As a result, their impulse to rebel is particularly strong, but because they're incapable of independent thought, real rebellion is impossible for them. Consequently, they're suckers for the system's trick, which allows them to irritate people and enjoy the illusion of rebelling without ever having to challenge the system's basic values.
This is what I'm saying. Like, yo, legitimately, I fucking hate college and college professors as a whole. And legit, I think we'd be a whole lot better off without them. Right? All right. So think about it like this, right? If you go from birth to school, back into the school to go work, you are literally a part of the system as a whole, right? You are physically, right? Like you are the system, right? Because you're literally going from birth into the system, into another system, and going back and staying in that system. You've never left. You never left the system as a whole. So therefore, you are the system. Like, yo, understand that. If you literally live inside of that structure and you never left that structure, you are the worst part of our fucking society, right? You are literally the system itself as a whole, right? And you are the example of what the system really wants.
Because they're the teachers of young people, the university intellectuals are in a position to help the system play its trick on the young, which they do by steering young people's rebellious impulses toward the standard stereotype targets: racism, colonialism, women's issues, etc. Young people who are not college students learn through the media or through personal contact of the social justice issues for which students rebel, and they imitate the students. Thus, a youth culture develops in which there is a stereotyped mode of rebellion that spreads through imitation of peers, just as hairstyles, clothing styles, and other fads spread through imitation.
All right, this is again another important thing that I want to mention right here. Like, yo, what the world does as a whole to an individual, right? Just in general, right? It literally just wears off edges. You start off as this individualistic, like sharp rock with all these edges to it. And by banging around inside of with other rocks around other people, you end up like the other fucking people. And like, yeah, your rough edges may bang pieces off of other people as well. But in the end of the day, you will end up much softer than when you fucking started off. That's important to understand.
When was this written?
I don't know.
It's interesting to see social justice mentioned.
There are a lot of callbacks.
Because this has to have been before 2000, I don't know, 10 or so? Well, I'm trying to think of when I first heard the term social justice. But it's probably way older than I think.
The term itself is really old. And I've noticed, too, that a lot of these concepts, a lot of the little buzzwords that these people will use to, like in present times have been around. Like, okay, have you ever seen somebody accuse... Like, people will accuse somebody like Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro or any of these other talking heads. They'll accuse them of being a reactionary.
Yeah.
That is one of the oldest, like, communist slurs that... I mean, that might have been the case. Maybe Google could help out with that, but I want to say that word has been around at least since the 30s. There's a lot. Wow. There's a lot of callbacks to really old concepts, and you know what? These people never change. They're using the same fucking tactics and the same tricks. It's amazing. Yeah, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, for some reason my stream just paused on my phone, but I think we're... You know what? My shit probably disconnected. All right, so number
streaming.
All right,
excellent connection.
Good. Yeah, still 0 dropped frames. Not a dropped frame.
Wow.
I didn't even change the wire. We were talking about this last stream.
Yeah.
I went outside. Yeah, Becca said that there might be a grounding cable that goes to the box outside for the cable connection that was corroded. They said they came out and replaced hers. Mine looked fine. I didn't do anything to it. I could have replaced it, but...
Yeah, I mean, those can get corroded, but... Luckily, the piece of cable inside is not really exposed to anything. Unless it's been damaged.
Yeah, like I said, maybe it's a weather difference. I mean, she's down there in Texas. As you know, Becca is a Holocaust survivor. Yes, they were completely frozen down there for a while, and you know what? She saw it through. So, congratulations.
Well, good.
Yeah, shout out to all the Holocaust survivors in the chat. Pnoid News says, Ryan, I'm using this. I'm stealing this and doing a video on it. Dude, you should. Everybody should do a fucking video on this. This is it's called the System's Neatest Trick. You just Google that. It's the first one that comes up. It's free.
And it was written by somebody named Theodore J. Zanisky, something like that. That's hard to pronounce.
I have never heard of this guy before, but he's a fucking genius. All right.
He's a smart guy.
We're almost here. This is number 4. It says the trick is not perfect. Naturally, the system's trick doesn't work perfectly. Not all the positions adopted by the activist community are consistent with the needs of the system. In this connection, some of the most important difficulties that confront the system are related to the conflict between the two different types of propaganda that the system has to use: integration propaganda and agitation propaganda. Integration propaganda is the principal mechanism of socialization in modern society. It is propaganda that is designed to instill in people the attitudes, beliefs, values, and habits that they need to have in order to be safe and useful tools of the system. It teaches people to permanently repress or sublimate those emotional impulses that are dangerous to the system. Its focus is on long-term attitudes and deep-seated values of broad applicability rather than on attitudes towards specific current issues. Agitation propaganda plays on people's emotions so as to bring out certain attitudes or behaviors in specific current situations. Instead of teaching people to suppress dangerous emotional impulses, it seeks to stimulate certain emotions for well-defined purposes localized in time. The system needs an orderly, docile, cooperative, passive, dependent population. Above all, it requires a nonviolent population, since it needs the government to have a monopoly on the use of physical force. For this reason, integration propaganda has to teach us to be horrified, frightened, and appalled by violence, so that we will not be tempted to use it even when we are very angry. By violence, I mean physical attacks on human beings. I wish that were the standard. More generally, integration propaganda has to teach us soft, cuddly values that emphasize non-aggressiveness, interdependence, and cooperation. On the other hand, in certain contexts...
All right, hang on a minute. Right, and that's really important to understand, right? That's why, like, you hear about things like smart cities and shit of this nature, right? Because, and these ideologies of socialism are okayed in a fucking system's ideology because it wants you to be more interdependent on each other, right? And it literally, like, most of this shit, it comes from people as a whole, right? It comes from cities. It comes from cities as a whole and colleges as a whole, where everybody is interreliant upon each other. And fucking, surprise, surprise, it comes from fucking colleges because of the fact that college professors have been fully dependent upon the system their entire fucking lives and were never taught to critically think or never taught to fucking do anything for themselves in any way, shape, or form. Real shit.
The system itself finds it useful or necessary to resort to brutal, aggressive methods to achieve its own objectives. The most obvious example of such methods is warfare. In wartime, the system relies on agitation propaganda. In order to win public approval of military action, it plays on people's emotions to make them feel frightened and angry at their real or supposed enemy. In this situation, there's a conflict between integration propaganda and agitation propaganda. Those people in whom the cuddly values and the aversion to violence have been the most deeply planted can't easily be persuaded to approve a bloody military operation. Here, the system's trick backfires to some extent. The activists who have been rebelling all along in favor of the values of integration propaganda continue to do so during wartime. They oppose the war effort not only because it's violent, but because it's racist, colonialist, imperialist, etc., all of which are contrary to the soft, cuddly values taught by integration propaganda. The system's trick...
Yeah. So, like, legitimately, like, the system wants war so it can continue to fucking maintain its ability to have free trade throughout the world. Because if it's not able to fucking maintain, it's not able to conduct violence in a war capacity to be able to sit here and, enforce trade and enforce rules and enforce the way things are going to go so that the system can operate and, open and do what it has to do with the whole world. Like, Europe needs energy. Europe has no energy in Europe, right? It has no oil. It has no natural gas. It has no ability to provide for itself, sort of like a little bit in the Netherlands, not enough to fucking provide for itself. So therefore, we have to, we as the United States, being this giant world monolith, want to be able to have Europe be fucking able to trade with the rest of the world and conduct business. It needs to have fucking fuel to do so. And so, therefore, we go to war in the Middle East to sit here and provide for their fucking fuel and shit and things of this nature. And on top of that, the world reserve currency is the U.S. dollar, and the reason why it is because of the fact that, Saudi Arabia stands here and, fucking only trades its fucking oil. Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar only trade their oil in U.S. dollars, which is the vast majority of the world's fucking oil other than our own. Right? So all fucking petroleum fucking transactions are done in dollars. And in order to have this happen, what we do is we stand here and we go to war whenever Saudi Arabia needs us to fucking back them up in a conflict in the Middle East against one of its proxies. Let's keep going.
Also backfires where the treatment of animals is concerned. Inevitably, many people extend to animals the soft values and the aversion to violence they're taught with respect to humans. They're horrified by the slaughter of animals for meat and other practices harmful to animals, such as the reduction of chickens to egg-laying machines, except in tiny cages, or the use of animals in scientific experiments. Up to a point, the resulting opposition to mistreatment of animals may be useful to the system, because a vegan diet is more efficient in terms of resource utilization than a carnivorous one is. Veganism, if widely adopted, will help to ease the burden placed on the Earth's limited resources by the growth of the human population.
Wait, was he saying that as part of it, or is that his argument?
That is.
I lost.
He's just saying that veganism would be less of a strain on the system.
Let me be real, man. I feel like Sinrise isn't trying anymore. Like, he's just not down for the cause. Him and Excel, man, I don't know what happened to them too. Like, they sat there and bounced, and they was like, fuck it. Like, yo, fuck this shit. Me and Ryan kind of, like, we kept going. I don't know, like, fucking, it's whatever, I guess, you know what I'm saying? Like, fucking, they found something in life that makes them happier than doing this shit. Which is good for them, you know what I mean? But, yeah, like, yeah, Peter's a pain in the ass. I'll be honest with you. You know what I'm saying? We're omnivores. Like, we're supposed to eat meat and vegetables. Like, yo, and like, if you want to have modern technology and modern medicines, you have to have animals to experiment on. Like, it is what it is. Let's keep going, though.
System itself, and that's probably why motherfuckers are out there.
Yeah, and okay, so that's what I thought. Yeah, I disagree. He's absolutely wrong because modern vegans don't grow their own food for the most part. They're eating food that was created by big factories and machines and all kinds of science and soy byproducts and shit. So
yeah.
If veganism meant you had to grow your own food and that's all you ate, then that would
system really does make us weak and powerless, and therefore identify obsessively with victims, with the weak and the oppressed. That's part of the reason why victimization issues such as racism, sexism, homophobia, and neocolonialism have become standard activist issues. An example. I have with me an anthropology textbook. This has got to be him in prison. I don't know. We'll figure it out later. Number 5, an example. I have with me an anthropology textbook in which I've noticed several nice examples of the way in which university intellectuals help the system with its trick by disguising conformity as criticism of modern society. The cutest of these examples is found on pages 132 to 36, where the author quotes, in adapted form, an article by one Rhonda K. Williamson, an intersexed person, that is, a person born with male and female physical characteristics. Williamson states that the American Indians not only accepted intersexed persons, but especially valued them. She contrasts this attitude with Euro-American attitude, which she equates with the attitude that her own parents adopted toward her. Williamson's parents mistreated her cruelly. They held her in contempt for her intersex condition. They told her that she was cursed and given over to the devil. And they took her to charismatic churches to have the demon cast out of her. Charismatic churches, of course, meaning the ones that speak in tongues. I always thought that was a cool word.
What?
Charismatic. Tongues? Charismatic meaning like they have a way with words. It has its roots in these churches that speak in tongues.
Oh, Interesting. I've been searching, trying to find out when that was written, and I found a YouTube video of somebody reading this essay.
Well, we could have just played that, but
I just thought that was interesting.
how long is it?
Oh, well, let me see.
Or who is it, really?
It's 35 minutes and 48 seconds long. It's a YouTube channel called Merely Human. And it's written by a British lady named Bibbidi.
Well, lucky you guys. You don't have to listen to Bibbidi the British bitch read this.
That's true.
You guys dodged a bullet. All right.
Instead, we get to listen to Ryan the American bitch.
Yeah, the one with the faggoty nasally accent. Pnoid News, I can't believe you're going to use this. All right. Yeah, cursed and given over to the devil. They took her to charismatic churches to have the demon cast out of her. She was even given napkins into which she was supposed to cough out the demon.
Oh, wow.
But it is obviously ridiculous to equate this with modern Euro-American attitude. It may approximate the Euro-American attitude of 150 years ago, but nowadays it's almost any American educator, psychologist, or mainstream clergyman who would be horrified at that kind of treatment of an intersexed person. The media would never dream of portraying such treatment in a favorable light. The average middle-class Americans today may not be as accepting of the intersex conditions as the Indians were, but few would fail to recognize the cruelty of the way in which Williamson was treated.
Yo, let me be real, man. Every time I see like a fucking bull dyke in a goddamn fucking place, and she's waiting in line somewhere, like, yo, I step the fuck in front of him. Like, yo, I cut in line in front of him. Yo, just to go, nigga, you ain't a dude. All right? Like, if you want to be a dude, you could stand here and try to actually be a dude. And you know what I'm saying? You want to square up and tee off with me? I'll beat the shit out of you. You know what I mean? I'll show you what the fuck it is to be a fucking male. Stop pretending. All right? I'm not playing your fucking pretend goddamn game.
Williamson's parents obviously were deviants, religious kooks whose attitudes and beliefs were way out of line with the values of the system. Thus, while putting on a show of criticizing modern Euro-American society, Williamson really is attacking only deviant minorities and cultural laggards who have not yet adapted to the dominant values of present-day America. Haviland, the author of the book, on page 12, portrays cultural anthropology as iconoclastic, as challenging the assumptions of modern Western society. This is so far contrary to the truth that it would be funny if it weren't so pathetic. Mainstream of modern American anthropology is abjectly subservient to the values and assumptions of the system. When today's anthropologists pretend to challenge the values of their society, typically they challenge only the values of the past, obsolete and outmodeled values now held by no one but deviants and laggards who have not kept up with cultural changes that the system requires of us. This is consistent also today because we are canceling people, trying to hold people from 37 years ago to the ridiculous standards of today. For example, Dianne Feinstein, I guess, had a Confederate flag somewhere along the way, Northern Virginia battle flag, and
yeah.
Feinstein, the apex liberal, really, career politician, all of it.
For sure.
Ridiculous. That's what that reminds me of.
Well, that what reminds me of is the story of a friend of mine who told me. Yep.
Oh, I assumed that black people were all a monolith, and I thought that since they were black, they thought a certain way. I just thought they were all like that. I mean, what the hell? Ridiculous. What's up, Atema? Atema was the one that brought that shit into our Discord for the first time. All right.
Oh, well, thank you, Atema.
Yeah, she brought that to our attention. It's like, fuck. All right. So Haviland's use of the Williamson's article illustrates this very well, and it represents the general slant of how Haviland's book. Haviland plays up ethnographic facts that teach its readers politically correct lessons, but he understates or omits altogether ethnographic facts that are politically incorrect. Thus, while he quotes Williamson's account to emphasize the Indians' acceptance of intersexed persons, he doesn't mention, for example, that among many of the Indian tribes, women who committed adultery had their noses cut off, whereas no such punishment was inflicted on male adulterers, or that among the Crow Indians, a warrior who was struck by a stranger had to kill the offender immediately, or else he was irretrievably disgraced in the eyes of his tribe. Nor does Haviland discuss the habitual use of torture by the Indians of the eastern United States. Of course, facts of that kind represent violence, machismo, and gender discrimination. Hence, they are inconsistent with the present-day values of the system and tend to get censored out as politically incorrect. Yet, I don't doubt that Haviland is perfectly sincere in his belief that anthropologists challenge the assumptions of Western society. The capacity for self-deception of our university intellectuals will easily stretch that far. To conclude, I want to make clear that I'm not suggesting that it's good to cut off the noses for adultery or that any other abuse of women should be tolerated, nor would I want to see anybody scorned or rejected because they're intersexed, because of their race, religion, or because of their race, religion, sexual orientation, etc., etc., etc. But in our society today, these matters are, at most, issues of reform. The system's neatest trick consists in having tuned powerful rebellious impulses, which otherwise might have taken a revolutionary direction, to the service of these modest reforms. See, that wasn't so bad. Shit.
All right, now that this video is an hour and 11 minutes, man, so I hope you guys enjoyed this, because I thoroughly enjoyed listening to this. And if y'all are not subbed to this channel, I'm going to leave the link in the description. Y'all get your asses down there and sub to this fucking channel. You know what I mean? Like, real shit. Make sure you hit the Patreon link. You know what I mean? Support the channel. Help me out with what I do. You know what I mean? Maybe I can, you know, earn enough money to, like, maybe pay my cable bill. That would be fucking nice. Not the cable bill. The internet bill. You know what I mean? It's like $55 a month. You know what I mean? Right now, we got about, like, $5 a month coming in on Patreon. It's trash. Like, yo, let's keep going. Let's build up more. You know what I'm saying? Thank you to the Patreons, TK Mal, you know what I'm saying? Dingleberry, all you motherfuckers who help out every month. It's appreciated. You know, in the meantime, man, you know the deal. I'm Tom Pease. You know, holla the fuck back. Later.